Alex Smith was released by the Washington football team earlier this week in a move that pretty much everybody saw coming. I think that'd be fair to say that most people saw this move coming. It saves Washington about $14.9 million in cap space, and there's going to be about $8 million in dead cap money, but it's going to save about $15 million, which is extremely important, especially this offseason with how the cap space and how the salary cap is going to be shaping up. It's barely even going to be plateauing, according to reports. So with what the salary cap is going to be undergoing this season, it's important for teams to have as much space as possible. And Alex Smith was certainly an expensive contract, and Alex Smith was a player that was really on ice with Washington anyway. Of course, there was that GQ article that came out about 3 weeks ago, in which Alex Smith was saying essentially, look, the Washington football team, they didn't want to give me a chance. They didn't think I could play. They didn't want me on the roster. I've basically threw a wrench in their quarterback plans. And, that interview at the time, I said that Alex Smith was taking things a little bit too personal. He was taking the actions of the football team a little bit too personally, considering the fact that he legitimatately almost died from his injuries, and he was reportedly sitting in that hospital bed contemplating never playing football again. And to have, I said at the time, I absolutely understand if you're going to be fighting for something so hard, to have somebody tell you no to your face when you're this close to completing your goal. It's obviously got to be devastating to you. But in the rationale of it all, I felt like he was taking it a little bit too personally. And I actually got into a bit of an argument in the comment section. Somebody saying, you didn't do your research. Alex Smith isn't upset. He understands why Washington was doing what they were doing. And I'm paraphrasing at this point. But he's like, Washington, or Alex Smith rather, understood what Washington was doing, and he's not upset. He understands why everything's happening. You didn't do your research. You're just cherry picking your quotes. And look, if there's a way to get under my skin, it's probably that, telling me that I don't do my research, or that I don't read articles, because I literally spend about 5 or 6 hours every night before the show doing my research. But regardless of that, there's a time and a place to do and say things in interviews like that, and that's why I reached that conclusion that interview had the airing of dirty laundry. Because when you've been working in the media and you've been going to press conferences as long as I have, and you've been covering sports in this fashion for as long as I have, you generally can get a tone in the context of what the players and coaches are going to be saying. And with a written article, it's very hard to decipher that. But the timing of it all is what kind of struck me personally. There's a time and a place to be saying things about your former regime, and while you're currently still on that team, it's not exactly the perfect time to say that if you really have no qualms or reservations about what the team did. So it did give off that era or that vibe of dirty laundry to me. So with that by itself, the Washington football team probably wasn't going to retain Alex Smith's contract anyways, but after that interview, you basically could have bookmarked it and guaranteed that contract wasn't going to be kept by the Washington football team. So Alex Smith gets what he wants. He gets a chance to potentially play somewhere else. He said in the interview that he feels like he has more left in the tank. He feels like he can still be a starter somewhere, and I don't necessarily know that that's true. Look, if the Washington football team, who knew more about Alex Smith at that time than anybody else, basically said, look, we don't think that you can play, we don't think you should play, and basically used Alex Smith as a last resort, if Washington felt that way and he was on the roster, they knew the most about Alex Smith, then you could definitely assume that the rest of the 31 NFL teams in the league felt almost similar about Alex Smith, and they're going to still have reservations about that injury. And so I don't know if necessarily he can go and start somewhere. I think odds are that he takes a veteran minimum contract or something very close to a veteran minimum contract to play as a backup somewhere until that team could get a better look at his physical conditioning. Obviously, that leg appears to be fine, but still there's always the fear in the back of your mind that something is going to go wrong. So it gives teams a little bit more time to become comfortable. He gets to be in a valuable backup role in a place like maybe Jacksonville, or in a place like San Francisco, or a couple of other destinations, or really if there are teams that kind of run out of options, maybe a team like Chicago. I always feel like I gravitate towards Chicago when I talk about any free agent quarterback, and I think that's ironic as hell because Chicago has never been an attractive place for a quarterback ever. I mean, they've been looking for a franchise quarterback for close to 40 years. Sorry, Bears fans. But regardless of that, there is a chance that Alex Smith can start someplace like maybe Chicago or New England. But I think the reality is that Alex Smith probably signs a veteran minimum contract to be a backup somewhere. Be a mentoring quarterback to somebody like a Trevor Lawrence, or maybe, I don't know, maybe a backup in Atlanta if they draft a quarterback, in New York if they take Zach Wilson at number 2. There's a lot of options. I'm sure that Alex Smith is going to have plenty of options and plenty places to play next season, but it's not necessarily going to be in the role that he thinks he can fulfill because, like I said, if Washington, who was in on Alex Smith, they were in the organization, they were keeping close tabs on him and his recovery. If they were scared and they were hesitant to let him play, you can be damn sure that the other 31 teams in the NFL are probably going to feel similarly. So that's for Alex Smith's side of things. For Washington's side of things, you have $14.9 million extra in cap space now. They had some cap space beforehand. Now they can try and plug the gaps and fill some of the necessities for that football team, namely fixing the offensive line, who they played a little bit better towards the end of the season, but it wasn't an outstanding offensive line performance. You can also go and get another weapon. I suggested Chris Godwin or Allen Robinson when I did my Front Office Frenzy segment on the Washington football team a couple of weeks ago. But really, now you have a gap to fill in the quarterback position, and what should the Washington football team do? And I said in the Front Office Frenzy segment that I think Mac Jones would be a perfect replacement, or at least a perfect quarterback to come in for the Washington football team. It's not really a dynamic offense. It's not like Alex Smith was the most mobile quarterback, and Mac Jones certainly isn't the most mobile quarterback. It's going to be a better scheme fit than I think are a lot of places for Mac Jones. And I think, he has great upside, and it really depends on how many quarterbacks are taken within the first 10 picks. And I've said that ad nauseum across multiple topics on the Hard Headed Sports podcast before, is that it really just depends on how many quarterbacks are taken in the top 10 slots, because Washington being a playoff team at 7-9 and getting the 19th selection in the draft is a weird spot to be in for them as a football team. So I think if everything goes to plan, I think you can make a bet that Mac Jones is probably going to be available at number 19. I think Justin Fields goes top 10. I think Zach Wilson goes top 10. There's odds that Trey Lance goes top 10 as well. And obviously Trevor Lawrence is going top 10 as well. He's going at number 1 overall. But depending on who's there, you may have Trey Lance, you may have Kyle Trask, you may have Mac Jones, or you can maybe try and get a quarterback later in the draft, somebody like a Kellen Mond from Texas A&M who had a really good Senior Bowl. So there are options for the Washington Redskins. I don't think they address the quarterback need in free agency. There's not really that many good free agent quarterbacks. There's a chance that Dak becomes a free agent, but at the price point that Dak is going to be asking for, I don't think the Redskins are going to have enough cap space to sign Dak. Dak is asking for $40 million, like right behind Mahomes, and as many people were quick to point out when I talked about the contract war with Jerry and Dak in a video earlier this week, they're like, he's not even worth $25 million, and to some extent I would agree. So the going rate for a quarterback is about $40 million. I don't think the Redskins are going to be able to pay that, and I don't think the other options are really as enticing in free agency unless Washington wants to try and go get Deshaun Watson in a trade. But I'm under the impression, and I'm of the mind, that Jack Easterby and Deshaun Watson are about to have a long, drawn-out war that's going to play well into the season, and he's not going to be traded. So that really leaves Washington in a situation where they probably want to go after somebody in the draft. Taylor Heineke signed a two-year contract extension. So in my mind, I think Taylor Heineke is going to be starting week 1 for the Washington Redskins. I do it every time. The Washington football team. Taylor Heineke is going to be starting week 1. He's earned that right. He's earned the opportunity to be starter after his playoff performance against the Buccaneers. He and the football team played the Tampa Bay Buccaneers about as good as any playoff team last season, so he's earned the right to start. I think they probably take a quarterback in the first round and have him play behind Heineke and see where things go from there. But let me know what you guys think about Alex Smith, where you would like to see him play, or if he ends up anywhere, or if he just retires. That's also an option. And then, of course, what Washington is going to do at the quarterback position heading into a next season in which the NFC East is very much in their control, especially if they get themselves a good, reliable quarterback. Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching this segment from the Hard Headed Sports Podcast. You've heard what I've had to say, now I'm interested to hear what you think as well. If you enjoyed this highlight from the show and want to watch more highlights from the show as they come out after the show's completion, you should definitely subscribe to the YouTube channel, and if you're interested in listening to the entire show in its full-length entirety, you should follow the show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Anchor. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you all very soon.